Hello everybody and welcome to our webinar series with Dunkermotoren to the Smart Factory. Today I would like to introduce to you our speaker Michael Burgert. I ask everybody of you to mute your microphone. If you have any questions during the session, please use the chat function. And now I will ask to Michael to start the webinar.
So hello everybody, and welcome also from my side to today's webinar. Today's topic is DC servo motors, features of Dunkermotoren BG motors. And the topics in detail are, just a second. Okay. Topics of today are, first of all, the classes of our BG motors. Then I will go to the features and will explain also some details about our protective functions. And as a last point, we have questions and answers. As my colleague Janina said already, please leave notes in the chat functions, and if there's enough time at the end, we can also open the microphones and ask questions directly. So let's start this webinar basis a little bit on last week's webinar on the motor basics. So if you have missed that one, it's available on the internet, on YouTube, on our Dunkermotoren channel. I will repeat two of the slides, and apart from that, I think most of the content is new. So what we started last week is the function of BG motors, and here I went into detail about the active part, the stator and the rotor, which you can see here as part of the complete system. But it does, of course, not only consist of stator and rotor and the output shaft. What you can see here also is the housing and the bearing shields. And I mentioned this in particular because we spent also a lot of time designing a really robust system with not only really thin materials, but it's really robust and designed for industrial use. This doesn't only apply for the housing and the bearing shields, but also for the electrical connections. These are IP65 protected connectors, so that any humidity or some water ingress is not possible. What is also important to know is or to see is the position sensors. With this, the motor knows the position of the rotor shaft and can, with this position, define which of the windings, which of the coils need to be energized to move the rotor in the right direction or to give more power, less power, depending on what the status of the rotor is. Then we have the power stage. These are the electronic switches that switch the windings on and off, and that power the motor and give power to the motor windings and therefore to the generate the torque. As the last point, we have the motor control and communication. On that motor control, you have a firmware that defines the functions of the motors. And here you can see a small microchip in earlier generations. There was not a big microchip integrated because it was simply too expensive. But nowadays there's a 32-bit high-end processor integrated, specially made for motion control. And only with this processor, this new processor generation, all the functionalities that I will explain on the later slides are possible. The next two slides, this one and the next one, I repeat from the last webinar session in case you have not attended those. I will give the information on the output power of the motor output power range. It starts with BG32 at 20 watts, and the BG95 has a continuous output power of 1,100 watts continuous and 3,900 watts peak, which is quite an impressive power range. And they all can be controlled through the same mechanisms. On the smaller motors like BG32, BG42, and 22, only external controllers are possible, because if we would integrate the electronics, the cost of the integration would not be reasonable. This is why we only integrate on sizes 45 millimeters and bigger. And here, even on the BG45, we have all the functionalities that I will explain later integrated in the motor housing. Of course, you can also get all these motors with external controllers, but our target is to integrate as much as possible, because that's the demand of many of our customers that like the design of a really compact housing and no external components like external amplifiers, external safety components, because we integrate everything, and they and customers don't need that space in the cabinet. What I also would like to mention again is the modular system, because the motor itself offers lots of functions, but of course, in only few cases, motors are used without any gearboxes or brakes. And this is why I would like to show you that we also have lots of gearboxes, like warm gearboxes or the Spiritech gearbox or planetary gearboxes in our portfolio. The Spiritech gearbox I would like to mention in particular, because this was designed for industrial use and for very, very high lifetime. The warm gearbox is the cost-effective way for turning the torque in 90 degrees angle. But the Spiritech gearbox is really lifetime optimized and can get more than 20,000 hours of lifetime, depending on the type of operation. On the rear side, we have the brakes that you can attach, especially in vertical applications. It's sometimes important to have a brake that, in case the power is off, the motor shaft should not move anymore. We also have a wide range of encoders, also absolute encoders. These housings that you can see here are just example images also for the brake, because you can also get the brake completely integrated in the same motor profile as the motor itself. Now for the functions. And here it starts with the core motors. These are the motors that have no integrated electronics. They just have Hall sensors and some components that compensate the EMI. But there you need an external controller like the BG 5510. Then we have the DGO electronics. This already has an integrated electronics. It only makes the commutation and no speed control. This can be used if the load always is roughly the same, like for fan applications or for applications or for pump applications. Then these Servo classes are DMove and DPro, and DMove has only some basic functionalities that I will explain. I said only, but in fact, these are quite many features already, and the DPro has the really large, the complete function package. I start with the DMove functionalities, and of course we have speed control, current and position control, and this is something that can be that every DMove motor has included. We have the I/O mode, which is a standalone mode and can open to control the motor to set speed and positions. Then we have motion code functionality, which gives the motor some PLC functions. You can program, you can write your own software and run it on the computer, on the motor, sorry. And we have configurable analog and digital inputs and outputs. I will explain that a little later. We have a ballast circuitry. So if you have vertical applications, you lift some weight and then you lower the weight. You have some energy that needs to go back from lifting to, or from the high position to the low position. This energy can be or needs to be converted into heat, and this is what our ballast circuitry, the integrated, does. We have a brake output and also brake management. So it's not only switch on and off a brake, but automatically, if you enable the motor, or if you initiate a motor movement, then you can define how many milliseconds later after enabling the motor, the brake should release. Because then also, again, for vertical applications, you can make sure that the load does not drop. We have an operation hours counter integrated since a bit more than 1 year. And this gives you the possibility to see when the motor is in the field for some weeks, months, or even years. You can see how many hours was the motor enabled, how many hours did it run, how many hours did it run in overload condition. I mean, overload condition is okay, but of course you can find out, okay, it never ran, or just for a couple of minutes it ran in overload. So for the next design, you probably can decide to use a motor with less output power, a smaller motor. So this gives you really information on how did the motor perform in the field, and give you information what the end customer or the end user, how much he used the motor. It's not a secret. All this information is freely accessible, so you can read it out, and your end customer can also read it out at any time. All these functions are already included in DMove. And in addition to these functions, we have in the Pro some more functionalities like field-oriented control. This gives you better efficiency. It gives you better noise behavior than in the DMove. Then we have industrial Ethernet. I will explain that a little later on the next slides. We have interpolation mode and jerk optimized ramps, which is very useful if you have sensitive mechanics where you don't want to put too much shock and vibration into the mechanics if the motor starts and stops. Then we have safe talk off functionality, which I will explain on the later slides. IIoT options. Here I would not go into details because Marcus Weiser, my colleague, will explain all those options in detail in one of the next webinars. I'm sure he will give you very excited information, new information about the IIoT options. Then we have the SSI interface. Usually it's used for the multi-turn absolute encoder, but it can also be used to connect an external absolute encoder to the motor and read those signals inside the motor and position to an external absolute encoder. Now I would like to explain some of these functionalities a bit more in detail. First of all, the I/O mode. So if you buy a DMove or the Pro I/O motor, it will run in standalone mode. The factory setting is 2 fixed speed and analog input. And with this already, you can do many applications. You can set up to 14 different positions, speeds, currents, and ramps. And you can assign these functions to the digital inputs. That means you want to have maybe 5 different positions programmed, but in case you also want to have a speed mode, you can do this with the same motor. You can just assign these functions to the digital inputs. And also the outputs can be configured so that you probably output an error message to the, or if you have reached the position to the output, or simply the Hall signals, you can set an output to the digital outputs. And if you want to change the functions and you cannot live with the two fixed speeds and analog input, you can use Drive System 5 to commission and to set the parameters and set all the positions. A bit more in detail on practical examples. I have a belt drive and use the I/O mode with two fixed speeds and analog input. So if I set in 0 and in 2, the motor will run at low speed. If I set in 0, 2, and 3, it will run at a high speed. And at a third combination, you can set the speed with an analog input, -10 to +10 volts input, which is also very useful for many, many applications. This is use one of the I/O mode, but you also can set positions, up to 14 different positions. You can set in Drive System 5, load it to the motor. And as soon as it's loaded to the motor, you can disconnect the commissioning PC. And depending on the positions or on the digital inputs that it is defined, the different positions will be reached by or will be driven to when you set the corresponding digital inputs. Then we have bus operation. If 14 positions is not enough, or if you want to also change different other parameters, then you can remote control the motor with a PC or with a PLC, and then you can set more positions. Like in this example, someone wrote a software that defined many different positions, but of course, any position that the motor can access can be transferred to the motor, and the motor will execute those commands and will drive to those positions. Not only position, speed, and currents can be defined, but also more than 400 different drive parameters like tuning parameters. You can also read out the temperature, current, voltage, or the position, and this way get an insight into the motor, get status information that you can use also, for example, for condition monitoring. If for bus operation, we offer different buses like CAN-open, EtherCAT, Profinet, Profibus, which will be replaced by Profinet in many applications at the moment, and Ethernet IP. For CAN-open, we support CIA, the standard CIA 301 and the profile CIA 402. And also we have some customized objects and some quick start objects that help you to reduce the bus load by combining several commands to one. The next interface I would like to present you is the EtherCAT interface that we offer. Here we have synchronous operation that is possible with distributed clocks, and we will have it certified by the ETG. The certification is not just a label that is printed on the motor, but it helps you and the customers to have easier commissioning, because it makes sure that we are compliant to all the rules and all the standards, and that the motor will it's basically a guarantee that the motor will run without any problems. We also have already certified our Profinet solution, certified by the Profibus user organization. And here we do not only have simple Profinet, but we have the ProfiDrive drive profiles, the AC1 and 4, which gives you synchronous operation possibilities, which is really high end. And we are actually the first ones that integrate the certified ProfiDrive application class 1 and 4 completely into the motor. Then we have Ethernet IP in preparation. Ethernet IP is running, but we are working on the add-on instructions, which are really common for Ethernet IP and which are currently in work. So all the commissioning, and that's really something special. You don't need different commissioning tools. You can use for all bus systems, you can use Drive Assistant 5. I will give some more information on Drive Assistant on one of the next slides. You can have access to all the objects. And as I mentioned previously, we have quick start commands that help you to reduce the bus load by combining several commands into one command. Next type of operation is motion code. Also here, Markus Weiser will give you a good presentation on what is possible with motion code. It's really exciting, it's new, and the really exciting thing is that everyone that has little C programming experience can write programs, can program the motor in a way so that it runs standalone with your own ideas. You can realize your own ideas with motion code. What you need is the programming environment Eclipse and also an add-on from Dunkermotoren, and then you can start programming. You program the motor, load it to the motor, then you can disconnect the commissioning PC, and then the program that you wrote will run and will execute some tasks. And you can also give commands to different motors or actuators. Like here, the motor would do all these actions himself and give commands also by digital outputs to other devices. Drive Assistant 5, as I mentioned, is the commissioning software. You can have access to all the parameters. You can even get connection to EtherCAT motors, one-to-one connection, also to Profinet and to CAN-open. You just can select the interface. And then you have, as I said, access to all the parameters. You can do tuning. That means you can optimize the parameters by having a look at the by looking at the behavior of the motor and change that behavior with all the parameters. Then you can set the parameters for the I/O mode. You can set different speeds, acceleration, deceleration, and so on, as I explained previously for the I/O mode. The oscilloscope mode is also very helpful for the tuning process because you can see, is there enough current, or does the motor move too far? Is the position correct, and so on? And you can compare, you can make different measurements, compare them on one screen, and then use it for optimizing the motor, even with EtherCAT or Profinet motors. And in my background, there's also, as you can see, the list of all the parameters that you can change and then change the behavior of the motor. The last function I would like to explain is Safe Torque Off. This is one of the most recent functionalities. It switches off the motor safely according to the relevant standards. It's mainly the machine directive that makes those the safety necessary. But of course, it makes all the machines and your applications much safer. We offer safety levels CL2 or performance level D with 2 enable inputs and 1 status diagnostic output. You can execute this safe stop and check if the safe stop function is still good, and make the diagnostics with the diagnostic output. All BG or BG95D Pro is already certified with SDO. The TÜV certified it already beginning of this year. And after BG95, soon will follow BGE 5510. Here it will be in the next couple of weeks. And also BG66, we are in the process of having it certified. And this will also be followed by BG75. so that we have the certification so that you can rely on our safety function. All the Profinet EtherCAT or Ethernet IP will have SDO as a standard, and it's optional for all the Pro motors. Some words on protective functions. We have overload, over voltage and under voltage protection, which protects the power stage and the electronics from too high or too low voltage. Then we have different temperature protection. First of all, we have a temperature sensor integrated, but this is really detects the temperature really slowly. And this is why we also have an I²T algorithm. And this algorithm measures the current, and from the current, it calculates how much heat is generated inside the motor. And with this information, it compares it to how much heat is dissipated by the thermal processes. And with this, we know how hot the motor would get if we continue with this particular current. So the motor calculates how hot will the motor be if I continue with the current current that flows through the power stages. This is a really complex algorithm, and we spend a lot of time realizing this algorithm. But in the end, it makes a lot of sense because you have you can make sure that you can overload the motor extremely, but still have no risk that the motor will overheat. Then we have also current limitations. Not only the peak current, but also continuous current can be limited. This does not only help to protect the motor, but also the mechanics. If you have mechanics that are not really strong and the motor is much stronger, you can limit the current and therefore limit the maximum output torque. So this was information regarding the motor. Here some insights on the MCP roadmap. MCP is the new motor generation. And here we have already BG95 fully in action. We have the complete BG95 motors already on the new generation, followed by BGE5510, where we also have the complete portfolio ready. With this, you can operate, for example, BG45. Then we have BG6566, the move already released. Soon we will release the D Pro, and also in the course of this year, we will release BG75. And towards end of the year or beginning of next year, we will start with BG45. And so then we have the complete portfolio with all the functionalities that I explained in this presentation, in this webinar. Okay, so much for a lot of information on functionalities on the roadmap protection functions. If you have questions, you can write them in the chat. Janina, are there any questions already that are asked in the chat function?
Yes, we have one question from Caroli. Hi, where can we download Drive Assistant 5 and how can we connect to BG75SI to set parameters?
Okay, with the download, you can find a link. You can find access to that on our website. We have a download area where all the software is ready to be downloaded, and to connect an SI motor or the future D-Move and D-Pro motors. You need the starter kit that converts USB to a CAN signal, and this can be connected to the motor.
Okay, I think we will get one question. Can we order BG75, 25 or 50 D Pro EtherCAT today?
For BG75 D Pro, we can do some sampling already for projects, but we are in the middle of the project, so we cannot supply big numbers. So please give these inquiries to your sales contact, and we will check if we can provide these samples. But for EtherCAT, we still have the old generation, or the current generation. It's not old. It will also work in most of the applications. But if it's really urgent, I would recommend to use still the BG75 EC, because, as I said, we can only provide samples, so we cannot provide serious production yet. This will only be possible towards end of the year.
Okay. Where can I find the dimensions for these Pro EtherCAT?
We have them already. They should be in the catalog, but if not, please write us an email and we can send it to you. But they should be already in the catalog, in the latest catalog that you can download from our website. This was released a couple of weeks ago. So if you have a look, if you download the new catalog, the dimensions should be in there.
Okay, I think he's answering now. Yes, our new main catalog is now available on the website. It just answers there is only for COIO. Okay, then maybe Arve just contact your sales person and we can provide to you the information. Any other questions now? If there are further questions, you can contact me or Markel anytime. There are some people writing, so we will just wait a minute. So now it's also time to say we have another webinar on Thursday this week, so feel free to join us again. And yeah, we are looking forward to have you on board again.
Okay, so thanks also from my side for attending. And yeah, as Janina said, if you have any questions, just let us know, write us an email, get in contact with your salesperson, whatever, and we'll try to respond as soon as possible. So thanks again, and this webinar has been recorded, so you can also download or watch that afterwards on our YouTube channel. So thanks, and hope to see you on the next webinar.